Brother read a fake will out loud in front of 73 people at my grandfather's funeral reception, and my mother stood up and started clapping before he even finished the sentence. My sister-in-law filmed it on her phone, and my grandmother, the woman who had sat beside me at every school play, every Saturday breakfast, every quiet afternoon I needed to disappear from the rest of them, she looked at the floor. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't grief. This was a land grab dressed in black. They had been planning it. That's the part that took me longest to accept. Not the humiliation of it, not even the legal consequences I had to untangle for the next 4 months, but the sheer amount of preparation it must have required. Someone had to source the notary stamp. Someone had to type my grandfather's name in that particular font. Someone had to decide in advance that I was the one who would not fight back. They miscalculated. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. I remember because my cat, Pepper, had knocked my coffee off the counter that morning, and I was still blotting the rug when I heard the mail slot. I almost didn't pick it up. I'd been getting certified letters from my brother's attorney for 2 weeks by then, each one more confident than the last, and I'd stopped opening them at the kitchen table. Too close to the window. Too easy to feel watched. But this one was different. The return address wasn't a law firm. It was the office of a man named Clement Holt, a state notary, Roanoke, Virginia. I didn't recognize the name. I sat down on the floor right there in the hallway and opened it. My grandfather had written a second will. Not a revision, not a codicil, a parallel document dated 11 months before his death, filed separately with a notary my brother had never met and my mother had never charmed. In it, he left the farm to me, not jointly, not in trust. To me by name, with a handwritten note folded inside that said only you were always the one who stayed. Don't let them convince you otherwise. I read it 3 times. Then I sat there on the hardwood floor while Pepper walked across my lap and settled against my side, and I thought about the last conversation I'd had with my grandfather. He'd been sitting on the porch of the farmhouse in September, 3 months before he died, watching the tree line. He had said, out of nowhere, I already handled it. I'd asked him what he meant. He just looked at me and smiled and said, "You'll know when you need to know." I had thought he was talking about the truck. He was talking about everything. My grandfather's farm sat on 41 acres in the foothills of the Blue Ridge. He had bought it in 1974 with money he saved working double shifts at a textile mill. He built the original structure himself, added onto it twice, put in the well, cleared the east field, planted the apple orchard that still produced every September. He had lived there for 50 years. He had buried his first dog there. He had taught me to drive a tractor there when I was 11. My brother had visited maybe 6 times in the last decade. When my grandfather died in December, we gathered at the farmhouse for the reception because that's what he would have wanted. I had spent 3 days before that cleaning the house, ordering food, coordinating with neighbors who wanted to bring dishes, making sure there was enough seating in the barn for the people who wouldn't fit inside. My mother arrived the morning of and immediately rearranged the living room furniture. She didn't ask. She just started moving things. I let it go. It wasn't the day. The service was at the church in town, and then everyone came back to the farm. There were 70-something people packed into the main house and spilling onto the porch, and for a while it was what it was supposed to be. Old friends of his, neighbors, people who had known him for 40 years, sharing stories. The kind of afternoon that makes you feel like a person lived a real life. Then my brother tapped a fork against a glass. He had printed something. That was the first thing I noticed. He was holding papers, actual printed pages, which struck me as strange for a toast. He cleared his throat and said he wanted to share something important. Something my grandfather had wanted the family to know. Something about his wishes for the farm going forward. I felt my stomach tighten. He read from the pages like he was presenting a business report, my grandfather's name at the top, a date from 2 years ago, and a list of bequests that gave the farmhouse, the acreage, the orchard, and all associated property to my brother and his wife, to be held in joint family trust. My name was not in it. There was a murmur through the room. Someone near the back said, "Oh." My sister-in-law was already filming. My mother stood up from her chair, slow and deliberate, and started clapping. Not the polite kind, the kind you do when you've been waiting. I stood up too. That's not real, I said. My brother didn't even look surprised. He just smiled, the particular smile he saves for when he thinks he's already won, and said, "It's notarized, sweetheart." Sweetheart. In front of 73 people at our grandfather's funeral reception. I am 29 years old and I have a master's degree in landscape architecture and I have spent more hours on that farm than he has spent thinking about it, but sure. Sweetheart. Let me see it, I said. He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Let me see the document, I said again, and my voice was steadier than I expected. I walked to the center of the room and held out my hand. He gave it to me. I think he expected me to look confused, to start crying, to fold. Instead, I looked at the notary seal and the date and the signature, and I took a photograph of every page with my phone, and I said, "Thank you," and I handed it back. Then I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and called my cousin Hadley. Not the Hadley on that list, a different one. A Hadley who had gone to law school, and told her what had just happened. She said, "Don't say anything else. Don't leave. I'll be there in 40 minutes. I went back out to the living room and sat down. My mother looked at me like she was waiting for something. My brother went back to talking, already pivoting to logistics, mentioning renovation plans, asking about the equipment in the barn like it was already his. My sister-in-law lowered her phone eventually. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody said anything to me at all. A woman named Bryn, who had been my grandfather's neighbor for 20 years, touched my arm as she passed and said quietly, "He would be sick about this." I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. When Hadley arrived, she didn't come in through the front. She texted me and I met her at the back door. She had on jeans and a coat and she looked like she'd driven fast. She hugged me once, then held out her hand and said, "Show me what you have." I showed her the photographs on my phone. She looked at them for a long time. Then she said, "The notary seal is wrong." She explained it to me in terms I could follow. The county stamp format, the registration number that didn't match Virginia's current notary registry. Someone had used an old seal, or a fake one, or both. Either way, it wasn't legal. "But will anyone believe me?" I asked. "You're not the one who needs to be believed," she said. "The document does." That night, after the last car left, I walked the property alone. It was cold, the kind of December cold that settles into the ground and stays there. The orchard was bare. The east field was brown and still. I walked out to the fence line at the far edge of the property, the one my grandfather had rebuilt with me the summer I was 16, and I stood there in the dark and made myself feel the full weight of what had happened. Then I walked back to the farmhouse, made tea, and opened my laptop. I had been keeping records for years. Not because I expected this, exactly, but because I had always known, somewhere in the back of my head, that my family's relationship with the truth was flexible. I had receipts for the money I'd lent my brother and never seen returned. I had texts from my mother asking me not to mention to my grandfather that she'd borrowed against the farm's equipment insurance, something I had never fully understood and had quietly saved anyway. I had photographs from every visit I'd made to the farm in the last 6 years. I had the maintenance logs I'd kept when I'd started coordinating the property upkeep after my grandfather's health declined. I also had, saved in a folder I hadn't opened in months, a draft message my grandfather had sent me from his email account 2 years ago asking me to look up a name. The name was Clement Holt. He had said, a friend recommended him for some personal paperwork. "Do you know how to find someone like that in Roanoke?" I had found him. I had sent my grandfather the information, and I had completely forgotten about it until the letter arrived. I called Clement Holt's office the next morning when they opened. His assistant confirmed that yes, the office had worked with my grandfather the previous year. She could not share details, but she confirmed the file existed and that my grandfather had been a client. That was enough. I forwarded the letter, the photographs of the fake document, and a summary of everything I had to Hadley. Then I contacted an estate attorney she recommended, a woman named Daphne Carroll who worked out of Charlottesville and specialized in contested wills. Daphne was precise and unhurried, and the first thing she said to me was, "The burden of proof here is on them, not you. The real will is filed. That's your foundation. We filed to invalidate the document my brother had presented within the week. The response from his attorney arrived 4 days later, accusing me of contesting a legitimate estate document out of personal jealousy. The phrase personal jealousy was used twice in 2 pages. I read it once, flagged it for Daphne, and moved on. What I was actually doing was going through my grandfather's paperwork. He had kept everything in a cabinet in the back bedroom, a green metal filing cabinet with a combination I'd known since I was a teenager because he had written it on a sticky note inside the cover of the farm almanac on his bookshelf. Inside were 40-something years of receipts, bank statements, insurance documents, seed orders, tax returns, and tucked in the back of the third drawer in an envelope with my name on it in his handwriting was a list. It was a list of every instance in which money had left his accounts in the last 8 years that he had not authorized. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. A payment toward a lien on a property in my brother's wife's name, an insurance claim that had been redirected. He had known. He had documented it quietly, the same way he did everything, steadily, without drama, and he had left it where I would find it. I sat on the edge of his bed with that list in my hands, and I didn't cry. I had been expecting grief, but what I felt was something more like fury, clean and cold, and very focused. I called Daphne and told her what I had found. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "That changes the scope of this considerably. We should get a forensic accountant involved." We did. His name was Terrence Boyle. He was methodical and thorough, and within 10 days he had mapped out a pattern of financial transactions spanning 7 years, most of them under $10,000, the threshold below which they'd apparently assumed no one would look closely, most of them traceable to accounts connected to my brother or his wife. When the state attorney's office received our filing, they opened their own inquiry. My brother called me the night before the inquiry became public record. He didn't apologize. He said I was destroying the family over property and that my grandfather would be ashamed of me. His voice was tight, the way it gets when he's frightened and trying not to show it. I said, "He left me a note. Do you want to know what it said?" Silence. He said, "Don't let you convince me otherwise," I said. "So I'm not." He hung up. My mother stopped calling after that. My sister-in-law posted something vague on social media about family members who prioritize money over love. The comment section was not sympathetic to her. Several people who had been at the reception had, apparently, already talked. Bryn, my grandfather's neighbor, submitted a written statement to Daphne's office. She had been present at 2 conversations with my grandfather in the last year of his life in which he had explicitly stated his intentions for the farm. She had not come forward before because no one had asked her. No one had asked her because no one had expected me to fight. That was their mistake. The hearing was not dramatic. I had expected it to feel significant, and instead it felt like a long administrative meeting in a beige room. My brother's attorney presented the document. Our side presented the real will, the notary's records, the forensic accounting, Bryn's statement, and the list my grandfather had left me. The judge asked several questions. We answered them. My brother sat across the table and did not look at me once. 2 weeks later, the court invalidated the document my brother had presented at the reception. The financial inquiry was referred to the district attorney. Daphne called me when the ruling came through and said simply, "The farm is yours." I was standing in the kitchen of my apartment in Roanoke when I got that call. I set the phone down and stood very still for a minute. Pepper jumped up onto the counter beside me and sat there, which she knows she's not supposed to do, and I didn't move her. Outside the window it had started to snow lightly, the first real snow of February, and the street below was quiet. I drove out to the farm that weekend. I hadn't been back since December. The key felt strange in my hand, not because it was unfamiliar, I'd had a copy for years, but because of what it meant now. The driveway needed grading. The porch boards on the east side were soft and would need to be replaced before spring. The orchard would need pruning in the next few weeks if I wanted a good harvest in the fall. There was a lot of work to do. I wasn't afraid of it. I walked the property the way my grandfather used to, slowly, starting at the fence line and working inward. The fields were still dormant, but the structure of them was there. The shape of the land, the drainage channels he had dug, the tree breaks he had planted to slow the wind. All of it still intact. All of it waiting. I spent that first weekend cleaning out the farmhouse and making a list. Not a list of grievances, a list of what needed doing, in what order, by what season. Foundation, then structure, then systems. Same as always. 3 months later, I took a week off work and drove down with two friends I trusted, and we started on the porch. We stripped the soft boards, replaced the joists, relaid everything. We painted the railing the same green it had always been, the particular green my grandfather had mixed himself decades ago and written down in a notebook I'd found in the cabinet beside the almanac. In the evenings, we sat on that porch and looked out at the orchard and talked about nothing in particular. My friend Quincy brought a speaker. My friend Wren, a different Wren than any I'd ever known, a person who gave me no grief and nothing but patience, made dinner both nights without being asked. My mother sent a text in April. It was 3 sentences long. Something about hoping I would reconsider pursuing the legal matter further. Something about the damage being done to the family name. I read it, put my phone face down, and went back outside. I didn't reconsider. The farm opened its first farm stay weekend in June. 3 guests, a couple, and a woman traveling alone. I hadn't advertised heavily, just a small listing and word of mouth. All 3 of them had found me the same way, through a community board for people looking for working farm experiences, the kind of weekend where you actually help with something instead of just watching. They pruned the remaining deadwood in the orchard and helped me build a raised bed along the south wall of the barn. On the last evening, the woman traveling alone said she hadn't slept that well in 2 years. I knew what she meant. The legal process ran its course over the following months. I didn't attend every hearing. I didn't need to. Daphne kept me informed, and Terrence's report did what reports do when the numbers are real. My brother entered into an agreement with the court. I won't detail the terms. What I will say is that the farm is no longer in question, and what was taken from my grandfather has been, in part, accounted for. I don't have a relationship with my brother now. I don't have one with my mother either, not really. There are occasional texts. There is a family group chat I have muted. There is a birthday card I receive every year from my grandmother, who is 91 and still sends actual paper cards, and inside each one she writes the same thing: "I'm proud of you." I keep them in the same cabinet where my grandfather kept his records. The farm runs lean and I work hard, and I am not complaining. Some weekends I'm there alone with Pepper, and the quiet and the particular quality of light that comes through the kitchen window in the morning. The one that hits the same corner it must have hit for 50 years. Some weekends there are guests. Some weekends there are friends. There is a woman from the neighboring county who has started bringing her daughter to help with the orchard on Saturdays, and the kid is 11 and determined and reminds me of no one so much as myself at that age, which is either a coincidence or not. I let her drive the tractor last month. She was fearless. I thought about my grandfather the whole time, standing off to the side, watching her go. He built this place for someone to keep. He just had to wait for me to understand that the someone was me.